What'd you guys think? It's great, right? So I think you know most of these guys. Let me reintroduce Jeremy Mayer, artist, sculptor, living these. This is a studio in Richmond, California.
Right.
Hi.
That, of course, as you know, is Ken Alexander, a master of typewriter repair, more than 43 years of experience.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And that gentleman you didn't get to see in the film, Doug Nichol. Producer, director, cinematographer, editor of the film. So I just want to say that...
Just doing a test, can you guys hear us properly? Or?
Yeah, I think, we can,
okay,
actually. Good. I'm going to give some instructions to the audience that if you try to shout out, these guys, of course, will not be able to hear you. So come down to these microphones. I've had a chance to talk to Doug already on the radio, but I'll get the ball rolling if you have questions or comments. By the way, I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but how many want to buy a typewriter now? Yeah, me too. Totally. I've been shopping for one already. I should go to Oakland. Okay. I guess I wanted to get a sense, Ken, maybe we can start with you for, I'm always interested in what kind of impact films have on, can you hear, Ken?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good. I'm always interested in what kind of impact a film has on the story, the people. What kind of impact do you think California Typewriters had on the shop and on your life? And do people recognize you and things like that?
Yeah, actually it has. We've been very grateful for the recognition and for the increase in business that we have. I am currently swamped at this moment, thanks to you guys, and I appreciate it.
Doug, what about for you? How do you talk about the reaction to the film? I mean, do you feel like you've helped revive this?
Well, it's been great. I mean, I started the film really as just a short film to help the shop originally. That was my intent. And then once I started making the film, I just loved the act of making it, and I kept working on it. And but ultimately, my original goal was to help Ken and Herb and Carmen in their shop. And so now with the film getting out and people liking the film, it makes me feel great that we've accomplished something.
Jeremy, what about you? I mean, in some ways, this is a kind of a profile of you in some way, the film, and how you kind of came of age as an artist, got discovered almost in some way. How do you describe the impact of the film on your life?
It's nice not to have to worry about life stuff. I can work, and I don't have to think about the pesky things in life. I can kind of concentrate on what I'm doing, and a lot more than ever before.
It's interesting. I wondered, would you have made, what kind of art would you have made without typewriters? I guess I'm wondering, would you have made sculptures about robots using a different kind of mechanical implement, or was it for you always about the typewriter?
Well, I don't think it was about the typewriter as much as it was about machinery. It probably would have been something to do with machinery. I grew up, all my family worked for the railroad, so I grew up around front-end loaders, tractors, trains, all kinds of heavy equipment, and it was always pretty fascinating to me. I was a mechanic for a little while on snowcats. There was always some element of being a mechanic, and oh shit, it's Ken's phone. I like doing the work.
I'll get it.
Sorry about that, guys. Technology.
Yeah, I'd be doing something that looked a lot like it, or was a very similar kind of method, I think.
Yeah. I was interested that you, and this wasn't necessarily mentioned in the film, but you don't weld or glue or solder the pieces. You don't really clean them unless you absolutely have to. You don't paint them. Could you just talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's so interesting.
Well, I just saw that pretty much every process, the same processes that were holding the typewriter together could be just kind of reverse engineered or, inside out engineered into something else. And it was really hard. So that was appealing to me, the challenge of it and the puzzle element, like a Meccano or a Erector set or kind of like Legos. And it was always challenging that way. But I don't like the appearance of welding or, I didn't like the idea of breaking the pieces if I didn't have to. I just wanted it to be a really pure kind of, taking one thing and turning it directly into another with just nothing but a few simple tools and some time.
Does it really take 1,000 hours to make a human scale figure?
Yeah. Sometimes more. But it's a lot of putting together, taking apart, putting together, taking apart until it works. It's not necessarily like a constant accretion until it's done. It's more like a apart and together kind of thing. Yeah, I make a lot of mistakes. I think that's why it takes so long.
How do you guys? I want to hear Ken on this, and then Doug, of course, you too. I guess the basic question is, what is the appeal for a typewriter? Why is that appealing? Is it because it's a mechanical thing? Is it a blast from the past? Like, how do you explain it, Ken?
From what I'm getting from my customers, I'm getting quite a number of them that are actually getting kind of burned out on technology. I mean, we're using it at this moment, and it's great, but a lot of my customers are creative type of people. They're writers, they're artists, they're songwriters, and they're poets, and and to just about every one of them, they can't do their best work looking at a computer screen. That feeling of hitting a key, having to strike the paper, I get it over and over again. That gets those creative juices flowing, if you will, and so they're just fascinating. A lot of them just don't want to do anything on a computer unless they have to. They're doing creative work. I'd say 98% of our customers are there for a manual typewriter, not even an electric one, but a manual typewriter. That really connects them.
I think it's the distraction. I think, when you're on a computer, you can do so many things. You can go on Facebook. You can go you can look at the news, whatever. There's so many things that can distract you from what you're actually doing. Typewriter, you're only there to do one thing, which is to create. Your ideas, get them onto a piece of paper. So there aren't those distractions. And I think, before the digital world, when we had so many options, whatever we did, it was a one-on-one thing. We didn't have a lot of things to take us away from what we're doing. I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like I'm not sure if it's a conflict in the film, but it seems like, Jeremy, you expressed, one of the things you say is you don't want to look back at the past. And a lot of, it seems like your thinking is about the future, like what kind of humans we're going to be, how technology is going to change us, yet you're making these sculptures out of old mechanical things. I'm guessing I just wanted to get your sense of how you think about, you don't want to live in the past, but do you see a conflict, and how do you talk about people's concerns with technology now, for example?
Well, the things I do are well placed in the past, obviously.
Yeah.
All the material is old. It was made a long time ago. It was put together a long time ago. And it's a time I was familiar with. When I was born in the 70s, I remember seeing people riding their horses to work and pumping water from a well and using a phone with, where there was an operator at the other end. And then my generation kind of built the web, and now I navigate that equally well as I did the world before. So this is kind of just a thing about this particular place and time, and the typewriter just happens to be the perfect icon of this transition that we're making from analog to digital, where it's, I'm taking the machine apart, and then it definitely evokes a feeling. Like, people feel something about that. Most people say, "Oh, I don't know how I feel about that." Once I tell them what it is I do, and then they do feel it in that moment, and I can see that. So I know it's like, I don't think I could do that with any other machine or any other sort of material. It's this very specific thing. It continues to be interesting to me about the time that we live in. The activity has something to do with the time that we live in.
We have a question from the audience. Yes, go ahead.
This is more from the business side. It was such a nostalgic film. It really was. I really appreciate it. It takes me back a few years. From the business side, you're bursting at the seams. Are you still in the same location? And
Yes.
You are still in the same location. And
Yes.
Are there any machines that you really feel you can't fix? That's one question. And then, are there also increased sales of carbon paper and onion skin? So people can make their copies without a photocopy machine.
Well, I don't know about. I'll answer your second question first. We don't really sell stationery, but I understand that there are people that are actively looking for those types of media. As your first question, I do run into some challenges. I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old. They built them while I was around when the machines were new. So as long as I have a working concept of how a typewriter works, and the manufacturers, they finally figured it out, and they all kind of went the same way with what's supposed to happen to get a key to print on paper. And they got their various ways to do it, but it's essentially the same thing. Like I say, I do run into some challenges, and but that's what makes it kind of fun too. You want to kind of run into a roadblock. So I'm liking it, and the business is, like I said, we do sell quite a number, and gosh, we're really busy now. So as I mentioned earlier, thank you.
You mentioned, Ken, thank you very much. You mentioned, Ken, that you liked Smith Coronas, or you mentioned that it was like a good Chevy. What's your favorite, though?
Well, my actual favorite, I'm not really a typist, but if I was, I like the Sam Shepard Hermes 3000. It's made in Switzerland. He had a later version, but there's an earlier version with a rounded ribbon cover on it. I find that the machine to be the most comfortable one to type on. Its design is just a little bit different from everybody else's. It's made in Switzerland, and I find the touch on it just be fantastic, at least for me personally. The Smith Corona, I like working on because that was the first machine I was trained on, and so I just have like a thing for Coronas, and I kind of compare it to a Chevy. It's something, because I had a GM car, and I can work on it myself. And then anybody who's going to work on a typewriter, I would suggest, if you're going to play around with one, start with a Corona, Smith Coronas. They're actually quite simple. You can see how everything works in it, and it's really fascinating.
Yes.
That's Tom Hanks' favorite one. Everybody comes in and asks me for the Smith.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Since Tom expressed his like for it in the film, we get a lot of requests for that particular model.
Yeah.
He's
So
driving
it's
the
almost
market, just like in Sideways with Merlot, I guess.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you very much. It was wonderful to see everything. There's a really fun video, and I realize that we're talking about typewriters, but there's a great video of children who are being confronted with technology that has become obsolete. And in one of those, these little segments where they're presented with this old technology, they're presented with an analog phone with a rotary, and I don't think at any point are they confronted in that video or that experiment with a typewriter.
Yeah.
But so much of this, I hear what you guys were saying about artists and people who are older and trying to reconnect and kind of get away. But children are inundated with all of this. How are you finding that they're responding either to the video, or are they coming into the shop, or how are they responding, Jeremy, to your work? Are you seeing like even kids are starting to kind of become burned out and get interested in this technology that they have had no connection with?
Yeah. Well, I do actually. We've actually seen there are a number of children that come into the shop, and they're expressing their desire for a typewriter. I mean, 7, 8, 9 years old, and there's more than what you might think. You got to remember a lot of their parents are kind of creative types, so they probably saw a typewriter at home, even though their parents are still relatively young. But there are kids that are just fascinated with them. I mean, I've heard reports back from parents where the girls had a slumber party with the typewriter. They typed all night long, and that's all they did. And so you get this, sleepovers with a Royal Standard typewriter, right? And, and it just started. They come in. I mean, and I've seen 3 or 4 year olds. They just come in. They see the key, and you can just see their eyes open up. It's wow. It's on paper. It's like magic to them. And the older kids are like, yeah, they are really getting into it. So yeah, a lot of children, a lot of them, and I'm assuming that they have the technology, the iPhones and stuff. But there's a lot of old souls out there, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. Over here, yes. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, first of all, I want to say I love the film. I love what you're doing. I even feel it in my soul in a way. Now, I have a question. Something I've been looking for about half my life was a Smith Corona or another brand that has a Dvorak keyboard.
Oh, gosh.
You know what that is.
Yeah, I believe the Dvorak was, I think, proven in type test to actually type faster than a QWERTY keyboard. But I think the QWERTY was just like so ingrained in the typewriter that it just never took off. At least that's what I understand about the Dvorak. I used to kind of see them quite often, actually, and you used to be able to order one from Smith Corona if you wanted one. But they're just so rare these days that people have got them. They're not getting rid of them. They're hanging on to them.
Okay,
So
the search continues.
your search, yes, it has to continue.
Thank you.
Good luck. Yes, over here.
Hi, so my question's for Jeremy. I have 2 questions, actually. Could you tell us a little bit about your current project that you're working on? And secondly, do you ever think you would feel the need to move on to a different medium, or do you feel like using typewriters will always be the way you express yourself?
Good.
I'm working on a bunch of commissions right now. I'm booked out pretty far. I was trained as traditionally trained as a sculptor. I didn't go to college, but I worked for many sculptors, and I did package design, and I did stained glass restoration. So what I'm doing is pretty much what I've settled on. I can do anything. I can do any kind of sculpture, but this is the one I like to do. And, I think the appearance of the sculptures will evolve, but the material will likely stay the same.
Thank you. Yes.
So there's this, I'm interested in sort of this dichotomy between the mystical and the mechanical. In the interview with Doug Fabrizio, Doug Nichol talked about this film made itself, so to speak. Jeremy mentioned in the film that when he takes the typewriters apart, he doesn't see pieces, he sees people. And so, Ken, I'm wondering, when you are working on these machines, it seems to be depicted in the film a much more mechanical rather than an artistic process. But I'm curious if when you're doing your work, is there an artistry to it? And if so, how does that work for you? What is it like?
I think there is kind of an artist. If you're a person that grew up like I did, just, you're taking everything apart that you could. And like I mentioned in the film, you're working on your bicycle, you just taking everything apart. And it's something that you kind of like born with, I guess, or you teach yourself to like it. And but what I see in typewriters, maybe not as an artist part, but I actually see history. I'll see these machines, and like I think I mentioned in the film that I just wondered where this machine has been, who had it, where it came from. You can see the worn marks on the top cover of a ribbon cover, and somebody was really working on some work with this machine, or this thing has been on some forefront somewhere. So I find the fascination in history more fascinating to me than maybe looking at it as an artist. But mechanically, it's just a lot of fun.
Nice, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Yeah, I enjoyed the movie a lot. Made
Thank
me
you.
smile. This is more of a filmmaking thing. The soundtrack was great. I don't know how you chose it or what? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, but I started the film as I first made like a 3-minute short, which is where the film grew out of. And when I made that short, I was just looking for some music, and I went through my iTunes thing, and I came upon the Ahmad Jamal Trio recording Stolen Moments. And I don't know why I picked that, but I put it on there, and it just worked. It felt right. So I decided to use jazz music for the story of the shop. It's the present day. Well, it's, their whole story was built around jazz. And then I used for Jeremy's story, which is more about the future, I used Sigur Rós, and I used some ambient music and kind of more spacey, forward-looking. And then for Martin's story, I used historic, American classic music from the 19th century, a lot of public domain songs, because I wanted the music to help you subconsciously separate the three stories, into the past, the present, and the future.
Yes.
Thank you for a wonderful film and for the work and also for the screening tonight. Any of you could answer this. Are you taking apprentices?
Ken needs one.
For the repairs, for the artwork, for film, to continue.
Possibly in the future, yeah. I've been getting a lot of people asking about it, so we're going to look into that, because there are a lot of people that are out there that are actually learning to fix it themselves, and they buy notebooks and everything. So, yeah, it's definitely something that's on our mind. I don't know about this guy here, though.
Imagining that this will continue because we're all starved
Yeah.
for what this represents.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you need people. Ken should train somebody to repair them, because it's like Ken has a knowledge which is disappearing, and you can look through an old book, but you'll never really truly figure it out.
Yeah.
Jeremy definitely needs an apprentice to.
I have a couple.
He could be more prolific with his apprentice. But
I have a couple, but get what you pay for.
That's right. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much for this movie and for what you're doing. One of my prized possessions is my 42-year-old portable manual Brother typewriter that my dad bought me as a high school graduation gift. And one of my mother's prized possession is the Royal Upright typewriter that my father did several of his manuscripts of published works on, and he has been gone for 16 years. And 5 years ago, the last typewriter repair shop that we knew about closed here in Utah. Seeing this shop, my mother and all of us in the family have basically mourned, because we thought it was just a matter of time before we could not use these prized possessions. I own about 12 manual typewriters, and only one of them works. And so seeing your shop is basically giving us a hope and a promise for the future that we have not felt for some years. I am so grateful for this film, and especially for your shop, Ken, and what it's doing in reviving this kind of hope and work, because there really is a wonderful experience of the typewriter that you're continuing on. So thank you. I really hope this makes it so that generations to come will have access to this. Thank you.
We'll try our best. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that.
Yes.
I'm just curious about what it was like to interview Tom Hanks, and how long that took, and where that room was, and what that was like.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. He played along, too, man. He was great.
yeah, well, as I said, the film started as a 3-minute short, and after that, the reason it became a movie is because we got the short to Tom. He saw it and agreed to be in it. So that was the first interview, actually the first interview that was shot for the film. It was in May 2011. And he was great. We did it at the Playtone offices in Santa Monica, and he's got typewriters everywhere, and he has them in his back room. He has them in his storage facility, and he was just great. He was so generous with his time and with his. I mean, he was really. You can see him on the film. It's something that he's passionate about. So he was just full of life, and it was such a great time. We shot in about 3 hours, and but Tom was the starting point, and then from Tom we were able to get David McCullough and then Sam Shepard and eventually John Mayer. So it all kind of grew out of Tom, the whole film.
Hey, Doug, would you just say something? I know that one of the stories in the film that didn't make it in was the story of the Unabomber who had his own manifesto, of course, a sort of rage against technology. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Herb, who owns California Typewriter, used to repair all of the typewriters on the Berkeley campus. And so at that time, he was doing it from the mid-'60s on. Theodore Kaczynski worked in the engineering department there. And so it was interesting. He repaired all the typewriters, so he obviously repaired Kaczynski's there at some point. Yeah. But then Kaczynski went off to Montana and took his typewriter and wrote the manifesto about technology and how we're eventually going to become pets to, like domesticated animals to, robots or, to machine technology. So he was really ahead of his time, and he was obviously insane, and he killed all these people, and it was the wrong way to go about it. But actually, if you read that section of the manifesto, it's actually quite profound and brilliant because it's exactly what's happening today. So I was going to have that in the film, along with, I found a typewriter collector in LA named Steve Soberoff. He collects all the famous typewriters. So he has Hemingway's typewriter, and he's got like 40 of like Andy Rooney's, everybody's typewriter, and he has the Unabomber's typewriter. So I had a section with him, who's collecting, who had the Unabomber's typewriter, and the whole thing about the future and Herb, and it became like a half-hour section that was just too big for the film. So it would have been like a 3-hour movie. So that had to go, unfortunately.
Let me ask you finally.
And I had Jeremy, I think, got a lot of those themes out that originally I was hoping to get out through that section. Jeremy's thoughts about the future and where we're going.
Tom Hanks. Yes, go ahead.
Speaking of future generations, just wondering if the ribbon is going to run out someday, or if that's made by somebody else, not typewriter people.
Well, like I said, I've got actually purple and green ribbons. So there's still colors being made. There are actually companies that still making typewriter ribbons. They're apparently going to be in business for a while because they're offering ribbons in different colors. We have the standard black and red, of course, but I haven't seen our suppliers have been there every time we ordered ribbons from them. So I don't see in the future they're going to have a problem with. No, not at all.
Yeah, they're made of plastic reels in China, but if you take the ribbons to California Typewriter, Ken will re-spool them onto old metal ribbons for you. So yeah, that's one of the.
If you want to keep your original spools, we can re-spool them for you. Yeah.
Oh yes, go ahead.
I just wondered, did Martin ever get his typewriter?
Oh yeah.
No, Martin is still looking. He's like, if anyone out there comes across the shoals in Glen, you got to get in touch with Martin. Because he's hoping, one of the byproducts of the film, he's hoping that with the word getting out that he's looking for it, somebody in America or in the world will have one for him. So, it was unfortunate because, the guy in San Francisco has 12, and, Martin just wants.
All right.
No.
All right, one more question, yes.
Okay, this is, first, Ken, how did you get into the business of repairing typewriters? What motivated you?
It was more by accident than on purpose. Well, I mean, I was going to college back in. I started junior college back in the mid '70s, and I just happened to be in the library one day there, and I ran into a buddy. He was studying, but he wasn't going to that college. He was going to a school in San Francisco, and he's over there learning how to repair typewriters. But the company had a high-tech name. They were called Control Data Institute. And so what they were actually teaching were computers and computer languages and things like that. And at that time, I'm taking this in college. So I'm going, well, I'll swing soon over here and I'll get a diploma in a year or two and I'll be on for a big money job. Well, long story short, I went to test for enrollment and I failed miserably. But apparently I qualified for their typewriter repair class. And so I enrolled in it. And here I am. I was 18, 19 at the time. So I remember those classes. It lasted about a year. They were intense. They were 8 hours a day. And it was all day. And so you had a bench partner you worked with, and then they send you out on a job after you finished. So I was pretty fortunate to land a job in Berkeley. I was trying to do the corporate thing when I first got out, IBM, Xerox, all those guys, and I'm glad I did. I'm glad I wound up by the campus. So it turned out good. But it was just pure by accident.
And I have one other comment. Is you'd mentioned in the film that the last typewriter production company has closed down. And I heard on NPR just a few months ago that there is a company that's making clear plastic typewriters for prisons. Yeah,
that would probably be Swintech. Yeah, it's not a manual typewriter; it's an electronic one. Yeah. And so you can. I actually have one at the shop. It's perfectly clear plastic. You can see all through it, and these. So it would, but it's not a manual. It's like I say, it's an electronic typewriter. So
it's not something.
Okay.
Yeah, you got one of those. You're not going anywhere. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you all finally, Doug, you and I talked a little bit about this on the radio last week, but Tom Hanks said, it sort of is somewhat like the last question. Tom Hanks, now this was 5 years ago when he told you he did not think good typewriters are ever going to be made again. 5 years on now, there's this resurgence of this idea. Do you think that's so? That's true? What do you all think?
Well, I don't know. I think to get, to tool up a factory and I guess they probably still have the plans and they could, from Smith Corona, they could probably actually go into production. It's just a question of whether there's the demand for it.
Right.
There are a lot of typewriters that were made, and guys like, Ken can fix them up for the people who want them. It's just if the demand exceeds the supply, right, then somebody's going to say, "Hey, let's make one."
Yeah. I think right now I think people like the antique, the nostalgia about it, and they like an older machine. I'm not sure if a 2017 manual typewriter would actually make it on the market. I just think there's too much nostalgia involved in some of these machines that people fall in love with, and you can't get stuff anywhere except from the past. So I don't think that's happening.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.